Animaniacs, issue 57. It starts out looking like Brain went crazy. He holds a doll shaped like Pinky and tells Pinky to dance to the music. And the real Pinky dances, and finally this confusing beginning is explained. Brain says he forced him to dance because he made a doll like him and studied voodoo to put a spell on it. But the only way to be able to make the spell work is if he had magic in him all along. That's convenient because he was born a normal mouse on Earth. But apparently Project Brain gave him witchcraft. Makes about as much sense as them being able to heal really fast because of it. He says that he could take over the world this way, and after Pinky flatters him, he points out that Brain might have to make a doll of every person on the planet. And somehow, he has to tell him that billions of dolls would cost billions more money than it cost to make the first doll. Not to mention the obvious that it'd take forever for him to meet every person and make a doll based on him. And by the time he'd be done, there'd have been babies born that he hadn't met. Somehow no one's pointing out that Brain can only control one doll at a time anyways, so it could be ganged up on by people. That alone means he'd never be able to succeed. Brain says the dolls have to be spread out worldwide to be close to the people he'll cast the spells on, arbitrarily. Since when do voodoo dolls have such a limited range? Pinky says it's too bad Beanie Babies don't look like real people because every house has one. He's exaggerating. And it's annoying that this issue doesn't just say Beanie Babies when issue of Pinky and the Brain does. Brain plans to sell Beanie Babies of everyone. Not everyone would have the self-confidence to want one, or the money to waste on it. He plans to design a web page, marketing scheme, and fan club for his Brainy Babies. So his web page would get barely any views because it's new and he's not a celebrity. He'd only get attention because he's a talking mouse, and how can he prove that over the internet without the evidence being called fake? Since the franchise often tries to have you believe he's not a celebrity for some reason, but realistically he would be. He tells Pinky to create some dolls looking like their neighbors. Brain tells Pinky that the dolls look terrible, but when we see the actual people, most of the dolls are spot on. He takes this too literally, so he fills them with beans. Brain finds out Pinky cast some voodoo spells on them. Apparently he got magic from being genetically engineered by a witch, too. Pinky denies casting the spells, and I guess he realized that Brain would find out the truth anyways, because he says yes. Somehow Brain tells him to toss them out, instead of planning on undoing the spells on them. I guess it's because he doesn't care. Brain wants to figure out the least expensive way to make his dolls. Pinky regrets what he did to these people, so why did he cast spells on the dolls that would inconvenience people instead of nice spells? Brain says using real beans is too expensive, and he's decided on the perfect filler for his Brainy Babies based on cost. Dried fish eggs from the cannery. Naturally, Pinky wonders if the smell would drive their customers away, and he has his nose plugged as the dolls are on an assembly line half made. Brain says he designed the dolls' outer fabric to hold in the smell. That just gives away that eventually the outer fabric would get ripped, which you should have expected to happen because toys get damaged all the time by kids. He'd only avoid this by making the outer fabric impossible to damage, but he's trying to make it cheaply so he couldn't. It makes the rest of the story boring when it's too obvious how it'll fail. Brain's told he'll get snapshots of the people who shop here because the dolls are in such demand. Brain and Pinky get interviewed. It gets boring because this happens so many times. I assume that the reason they don't stay famous after being interviewed during a plan is that the stories after it are in a different universe. Same goes for any other reason they get famous. It makes sense that when Pinky says the dolls being in homes makes it easier to take over the world, there aren't any consequences because they always fail to, and they're just little mice. Brain says he's got a lot of demand for Brainy Babies based on celebrities. In real life, he'd get in trouble for using someone's likeness without their permission, and it'd be even more likely if it's a celebrity. Making a doll of them would count. But at least this time it'd be a good thing that copyright laws ruined everything. Apparently in this universe they're more lax and people aren't allowed to sue that easily. He could have cameras and bombs in the dolls, and then he would be able to take over the world that way. threaten into it. But like the minute he'd make a threat about that, everyone would just get rid of the dolls. The dolls would have to bury themselves underground, bury themselves in the basement, lodge themselves in the walls so nobody could get rid of them. Brain then makes a commercial asking people to buy dolls for people with no money. Then at the toy convention, someone somehow complains that his doll doesn't look like him at all, and somehow that complaint happens again, and somehow the fat old lady says that everyone tells her she has dainty thighs. Probably because she asks them if that's the case and they're too afraid to say no. Since she's stupid and annoying, I love that Pinky says, if anything, the doll's thighs aren't fat enough. Even though he should have known she'd get mad. Why did the guy attack though? He'd have no reason to sympathize with her. Brain says he needs to get some dolls to Thailand, which is selling dolls imitating his brand. So Brain holds a telethon for it, expecting $1 million in donations. Pinky says, poor Brain. And that reminds me of a Pinky and the Brain story where he said that before he ruined his plan trying to help him. So, uh-oh. He says Brain looks tired and says he knows a way to get him energized. Brain wonders why it's bouncing after he made his goal, and Pinky says he can thank him for that, but then says he made a voodoo doll of him so he can rest. No, he wouldn't be able to rest because he's moving the doll. He'd know this right away. Pinky's having too much fun to agree to stop and let him end the telethon. But why can't he just say end the telethon whether he's dancing or not? Instead, Brain grabs and breaks the doll because it's somehow too easy to tear apart. He must be unusually strong. People hate the smell of the doll's filling, and when Pinky tells them the truth, they chase them away furiously, even though he told them they can't smell them when they're sewn up in the dolls. So they know it's not a problem outside of this room. Brain complains that his plan failed, but he'd still have all the money he made from the dolls. At least if he put it in a place where he can easily get it, like a bank. This story by Jesse McCann suddenly reveals that Brain and Pinky can cast spells after making voodoo dolls of people. And I just have to assume they got their magic from Project Brain. It's a miracle that Brain was desperate enough to research voodoo instead of assuming it's all made up, or at least assuming that he'd be too mortal to use it. It'd be more in character if Pinky was the one who discovered they could use voodoo. Brain's plan to have a doll in everyone's house and make people unable to resist his rule fails because Pinky uses a doll he inexplicably made of him and has fun with it until Brain breaks it, releasing the smelly inner filling, and sinking up the room on a telethon. But Pinky's right, usually the filling's safely trapped inside the dolls, so nobody has a reason to care. There'd still be demands for the dolls because they look like people, and he still made money. Maybe he spent all the money made from the dolls on getting the materials to make more dolls. His plan was doomed anyways because it'd take forever to meet everyone and make a doll for them, and he can only control a person if he's using the doll in front of them, which is always in their house away from him, not his house. So big deal, he'd stop being a threat to someone as soon as they'd kick him out. And word would spread very quickly the second he started using a doll to control someone in front of them, and they'd all hide them, or at least refuse to let him in. It's not like he's gonna program the dolls to hide somewhere they can't find, and then plan on going to the house to use it if they ever rebel. How's he expecting to take over America when he and Pinky can only control 2 people each, and they're the only ones who want them to take over the world? So that's what, 2 security guards in the way of the White House? Not even the president. Surprisingly, that's the last Pinky and the Brain story for this comic. So even though the next 2 issues have their covers say, featuring Pinky and the Brain, it's false advertising.